Listen, if you are struggling with sin, you need to watch this video. This is going to help you get free from sin and understand scripturally how, whether it's sexual morality kind of things, or anger, or lust, or greed, or pride, how to get free from that. And we're going to watch just a short snippet of this sermon, and we're going to break it down here. Let's watch this.
And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So, this is a very commonly used verse, and it's very practical advice. It's good for new Christians and old Christians. I'm sure there's 1,000 sermons you could find right now on YouTube about it. At least most of them will probably be pretty good for you. I'm going to kind of put this in the context of how I took it and understood it and used it.
And what he's about to do is he's about to share his own testimony, his personal testimony about how you can be transformed by the renewal of your mind. I fear that us as Christians, a lot of times will use verses like this and just say them, and it sounds good, and it's a great buzzword for everybody. But if I were to actually ask you, what does it mean? How do you actually apply that to your life? People can't give a real clear answer to this, and he's about to give this, which is going to help, again, transform whatever you're going through when it comes to a sin perspective.
He was always kind of, trying to lead me to Jesus, and I was... with the lifestyle I was living, I didn't want that all what I thought being a Christian entailed. And so I kind of brushed him off. And finally, when I got kind of to where I thought was my wit's end with the life I was living, I expressed, I want to do this. I want to follow Jesus now. So the first thing he did was he said, do you want to do whatever it takes to follow Jesus? And I said, sure. He said, can I take your phone? And I was like, I don't know what you want to see on there. And he took my phone away from me. He said, all I'm worried about is who you're talking to. So he got my Facebook Messenger app and deleted it. And at this point in time, I didn't have cell service on my phone. I used the Wi-Fi. So he deleted Facebook Messenger, and that was how I talked to people. Well, the people I talked to were all the people I was buying drugs from and things like that and partying with. And he explained, this is a cost of following Jesus. You're not ready to be around these people. And so what I did when he left about, I think it was 3 days later for a mission trip in Peru, is I did not take heed of what this verse said. I didn't even know about this verse really, but I didn't transform with the renewal of my mind. I didn't replace this old habit I had with anything. If you're wanting to quit cigarettes, a lot of times there are people that can do it, but most of the time you can't just stop. You don't just stop, you replace it with something. Because if you just go outside and stand where you usually would smoke and you don't replace it with anything, then you're going to fall right back into it. And kind of needless to say, as soon as he disappeared, I downloaded that messenger back, and then magically a glass pipe was in my hand, and I was at the little Maristop Hotel by Frisch's.
So the first thing he said that's really profound to me with this is that if you don't replace what you're currently doing with something, then you're going to continue in the same pattern that you're in, right? So even if you want to be transformed by the renewal of your mind and you want to think like you've never thought before, which is literally what that means, it's almost impossible for you to do this if you're going to continue in the same habit. So you need to replace what you're currently doing with something differently. That's a really practical way to go about this. When I gave my life to Jesus personally, I was struggling with sexual immorality, watching things on my phone that I shouldn't have been. You get the idea. And in the wrestle of doing that, I had heard a sermon a Sunday when I was 17 years old where a guy quoted from Hebrews chapter 12, which said, lay aside every sin and encumbrance which so easily entangles you, and keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross and despised the shame. Consider him who endured such hostility against himself by sinners, so that you do not grow weary. And I had recognized, wow, I have this sin that is so easily entangling me. And instead of keeping my eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of my faith, I'm keeping my eyes fixed on my problem. And the more I think about my problem and focus on my problem, the more I fall into the sin. And the more I fall into the sin, the more I try to fight and focus on the sin. And then I fall deeper into the sin. Whereas what Jace is saying here is, instead of doing that, flip and turn away from your sin and turn towards Jesus, and watch as a lot of this sin in your life actually falls away. Preoccupy yourself, make your time, focus, and intentionality all upon Jesus and doing things for the Lord, whether that's reading, whether it's praying, fasting, whether that's fellowshipping with other believers, doing ministry, and watch as you don't even have the time or capacity to do a lot of the sins that you were doing before. Let's keep hearing a story. This is crazy.
Magically, because I didn't take heed to this verse. So obviously, it was not magic. It was my own choices, but I chose not to transform my mind in that moment. Now, fast forward later on after that, and I have laid my life down officially for Jesus at this point in time. I had to replace my old habits and really my old friends. And so it's not to say that you can't ever go back to those old friends that you leave when you become a Christian who are opposed to your faith, but there needs to be a time where you replace what you did with them with something better. Now, it doesn't just mean you replace it with reading a verse of the Bible and listening to a Hillsong song that says the same words 50,000 times. It's bigger than that. You need to find a community, and that's why almost every single letter that Paul writes in the New Testament addresses us and we and let us, things like that, because he's speaking not just to one person, but to a community of people. And so that's a really...
So what he's saying is when he was living in this kind of lifestyle, when he kept continuing to be around the same friends, he kept doing the same actions. No surprise, right? It's really hard to live with a different perspective and mindset when you keep living around the same old perspective and mindset that you've had your entire life. So I had a friend just talking to the other day that I'm discipling, and he actually had mentioned this to me where he's like, man, like I keep struggling with this same thing of like, I want to see my friends come to Jesus that I used to live with or, and spend time with as well. He lived with him and like hung out with him all the time. And he's like 6 months saved and he's like taking his faith super serious. But he's like, man, I just don't know if it's wise for me to be around because I know if I'm around them, I'm going to start drinking again, using raunchy language and, talking about girls in the wrong way. He's like, I don't want to do that. So what he ended up doing is saying, we talked and I said, for the time being, it's not the wisest decision for you to spend time with these people. It doesn't mean you can't ever go back to those people. You can go back to them later, but for now, you're not ready. You're not mature enough. You're not prepared to be able to go and do this. And it was the same story with Jace here is it's not that he was never allowed to or never could go and spend time with these people. It's just in this moment, he could not. And the coolest part is the guy he's referring to in this video that got to help him through the struggles that he had was me. I know Jace personally. He's one of my best buddies. And I got to see him get free from all this drug addiction and stuff like that. And I did take his phone and delete Messenger. He had all this horrible raunchy stuff on his phone. And I told him, I said, I'm not even going to ask you to delete it. He had inappropriate apps to, watch things online that you definitely should not be watching on there. He had images of women that he had gotten from them on there saved. And, it was just bad. It was bad. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to delete any of it. All I want to do is get rid of the people you're around and get rid of your social media. Because I know if that's gone, you don't have the capacity or the ability anymore to fall into those sins again. And he got it back when I went to Peru on a mission trip. And then he fell right back into the stuff. And he actually went as far to say, Cody was stupid if he ever thought that I was going to give up drugs just because he bought some weed off me. Because I bought like $250 of weed off of him and I threw it in a sewer grate because he said that he just needed to pay for rent and he had no interest in smoking it. So after an hour of arguing with me, I bought it off of him and he went around and smoked it like a few days later. But then he came to the error of his ways. He recognized his sin, and he has not touched drugs in like 6 years or 7 years. I forget how long he's been saved now, but he's been following Jesus and crushing it. But it took him changing who he was around to be able to do this. And this is the big emphasis I want to get to you to understand when it comes to discipleship. Discipleship is like the core fundamental thing that is going to bring people into a different life in Christ. Matthew 28, almost everybody quotes that is, go therefore and preach the gospel to all nations, although Matthew 16 does say that and that is relevant. Matthew 28 says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. What's the difference here? The difference is preaching the gospel is just to see if somebody will give their life to Jesus or not. Discipleship is carrying them through, before salvation, through salvation, and after salvation, and walking with them through that entire process, and actually being there more than just on Sunday mornings. And this is one of the biggest deficits that our Christian church has in America today. If you go to the church in the Middle East, they are like a brotherhood. They're with each other 24/7. If you go into Israel, even the Jews are that way to this day, where they're very communal, very familial, where they're always with each other, and they have this very family and brotherly-like presence together. Us in America, we aren't like that. We do not do that. We are like so individualistic. We're so to ourselves. Unless there's some sort of benefit I can get, like it's a fun game I get to go to or a sporting event or something like that, then we want to be around people. But by and large, we are not like that. And when I had seen Jace give his life to Jesus and a bunch of other friends, actually the gentleman who you can see in this video as well, that guy right there, I got to disciple him as well. His name's Dylan. And both of them had to change the people that they were around. Actually, for Dylan, the gentleman who's right there, he was, when we'd spent some time together, he was really struggling with, alcoholism personally. Sorry, you couldn't see. I was circling it on the wrong screen, but over here, that's him. But he was really struggling with a lot of the things that he was going through when it came to alcoholism. And I actually just took him on to a trip with us when he given his life to Jesus. We were going on New Year's to a conference in Kansas City, Missouri. And he came to me, and I don't even think he knew I was going. He was like, man, like, can I hang out with you on New Year's, because I'm really scared I'm going to fall back into drinking. I've been like 6 months sober. I'm like, really proud of the success I've been able to see God pull through in my life. And like, I'm scared I'm going to go back into it. And I was like, bro, of course. Like, yes, definitely. Let's do that. So he came with us, and he didn't know, but I was like, dude, we're buying your ticket. We're going to like bless you, buy your hotel, everything. And we're going to have an awesome time and get rocked by Jesus together. He got to watch a preacher, whose name I will leave at least unsaid for right now, because everyone's going to call me a false teacher because this guy's got some wonky teaching. But this specific teaching was really good because he literally just read through 1 John chapters, or 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. And like everybody was like sackcloth and ashes weeping kind of thing. It was really heavy. It was intense. It was very convicting. And it convicted my friend here to live a completely different life. And he was able to do it, again, by the grace of God. So challenge you, be in the lives of the people around you. Do not just like sit by the wayside and tell somebody you'll pray for them. Like, be in their lives on a daily basis. Spend time with them, love them, pray for them, disciple those people, teach them the word, show them what it looks like to represent Jesus on a daily basis. And we will see revival come into our lives that way. Not by teaching more scriptures on a Sunday morning, but by living life with people and showing them what it looks like to represent